Welcome to another episode of Homeschool Moms Unfiltered. I'm your host, Megan, and my amazing co-host is...
Hi, I'm Amanda.
Hello. We are your source for messy, imperfect homeschool advice and community. To clarify, the advice is solid. So if your brain immediately jumped to, why would these two host a podcast if they don't know what they're talking about? No, that's not the case. That's not what we're saying.
Well, I mean, sometimes, but
Every once in a while. But what we are not about is influencer phoniness. We'll tell you the whole truth and nothing but the truth about our respective homeschool journeys so you know what to expect. Or even when you have a rough patch, you'll know it's not just you. We all have them and you're doing great.
yes, that's it. You're doing great, rough patch or not. So however you are, come, whoever you are, come, you're welcome here. I know it's called Homeschool Moms Unfiltered, but that's just because we're two moms. Five Guys doesn't require you to be in a group of exactly five men to grab a burger. We don't expect you to be a mom or even necessarily homeschooling. We are, though, going to be very honest and upfront about the fact that we are a progressive, inclusive space, podcast, and community for homeschoolers, prospective homeschoolers, and really anyone else who cares about kids. Welcome.
Exactly. And that can be really hard to find in the homeschool world. We're in all the same Facebook groups that you're in. And yes, we want to gouge out our eyeballs every time somebody posts the whitewashed America 250 resources that are being recommended every day. I saw someone seeking recommendations the other day in a secular group, which granted, secular does not always equal progressive. There's a huge overlap, but it's not a guarantee. But her post specifically said that she did not want anything whitewashed or right leaning. So this woman comments and recommends A Chicken Was There, and there's a bunch of those. They're being cranked out like the quality is. I've got one of them that I bought when it first came out, and it's light. So yeah, if you're not familiar, they're books about historical events written from the perspective of a chicken who happened to be at these various historical events. I have one from when they first came out. It is very light reading. But if you have a kid who doesn't like reading, doesn't like history, one or the other, both, whatever, and these are the books that loosen the lid on that jar, go for it and enjoy them.
Mhm.
Maybe not the America one, though. So in this particular book, I'm like, let me go read the description. So I read the description. There were a few red flags in it. The biggest one being, though, something about celebrating from the carving of Mount Rushmore to the settling of the frontier. And I was like, oh, that's a red flag. Just the fact that it was referred to as Mount Rushmore and not by the indigenous name was a sign that it was going to be portrayed in a way that was going to make me cringe if I read the whole book. I highly doubt this book is going to mention how sacred that mountain was/is to the Lakota people and how this desecration of this mountain is still painful to their community all these years later. So that part of the thread ended up devolving into a real shit show because people, including me, started looking at the person who recommended this book at their profile page to find all this anti-LGBTQIA plus, anti-vax. And honestly, it is just one of the many reasons we talk about how sketchy feedback in Facebook groups can be sometimes. Sometimes it's solid. Sometimes it's a train wreck, even in a secular group. But if you're newer to homeschooling or you're earlier in your process of decolonizing, you might not be able to spot the ones that are a train wreck quite as easily. And so, yeah, Facebook groups have their purpose. And then also, ooh, watch out.
Yeah, well, and we don't all have time to go Facebook investigating people just because they give you a recommendation. Like you just take the recommendation and you're like, oh, let me look into it. Let me see what I think. And sometimes I do think to go checking and seeing what kind of ridiculous stuff they've got on their profile or if it seems it's like it's so much work and effort. I don't have that kind of
Mm-hmm,
time. I don't have that kind of energy. Let's be
mm-hmm.
real. And the thing is, we did a whole episode about the difficulty with crowdsourcing homeschool advice. And it's truly a perfect example. Before we jump into today's topic or talk about previous episodes and how that ties in or any of that good jazz, if you are looking for accurate, secular, progressive resources to mark the 250th anniversary in the United States, which is next month if you're listening to this when it drops, but I mean, American history resources in general, it takes a lot of work to make sure that you're really including all of the different things. You can't avoid the fact that Mount Rushmore holds a specific note in history, but you also shouldn't avoid all of the other things that come with it and the legal cases and the proceedings and stuff that have happened since
Hmm.
then in recent time that so
Hmm.
many people know nothing about. Like that stuff all matters. Anyway, try to get off my soapbox here. Check out the show notes or head over to our website. It's homeschoolmomsunfiltered.com. It's really not that hard to find. Check out the unit studies we do. We have one that we've already put out at the time of recording, and we have a plan for a few others. The one that we just put out, it's super robust and it looks at the founder's promises and the reality that followed. It ended up being full of contradictions. The tone isn't the United States is all bad. We absolutely acknowledge that aspects of the American experiment that were revolutionary. Pun fully intended. But it is also honest and it encourages that critical thinking around a lot of topics that, let's be real, a lot of us as kids, we were just encouraged to memorize, not
Hmm.
examine too deeply. Like it says this and that's the truth. And like, well, just because they said it, Truth Social, doesn't mean it's true.
Hmm. Yeah.
So yeah, anyway, come check out our unit studies, whether it's about the America 251 or any of the others that we have put out. We put out all kinds of different things on different topics. And we try to make sure that they are really accessible and focused on own voices resources and things like that. We are just really passionate about creating resources we wish we had had
Hmm.
when we first, a lot of the things come up because it's like, oh, I was looking for a good progressive, inclusive resource on this thing. And I couldn't really find one. Or one of my favorite curriculum people, they don't have one on this. So like, what if we make one? So if you've never used one of our unit studies, they are designed to be easily differentiated for all ages. You're going to find recommendations for your littlest learners, in some cases, even board books that we recommend. And then honestly, we almost guarantee that if the grandparents choose to sit in for an activity or watch a video, they're probably going to learn something too. I was just visiting back home last month. If you listen, you know. And my mom was like, you guys need to make your next book one of those books that just pulls things from all of your different unit studies of stuff that we didn't learn when we were in school because we got whitewashed Eurocentric history, put them together in just a really easy, accessible book for the grandparents so that all the people who are homeschooling can be like, here, mom, you might want this. And it's not like a little kid worksheet, but it's actually really useful, important information that we should know that we just didn't get to learn when we were in
Hmm.
school. We just try really hard to make sure that we're all learning stuff
Hmm.
every time I watch a video or I'm doing the back end stuff for these unit studies, I'm learning new things.
Hmm.
And it also makes it really easy to use with multiple ages at once because the differentiation is already built in there. Makes it easy to come back to it again over the years, which is also so incredibly useful these days. Most of these topics you want to revisit, you want more depth at some point. It sucks to buy a curriculum and you use it once and then you throw it away or you recycle it, right? It's like, well, that's it. That worksheet's done. That workbook
Hmm.
is finished. You don't have to be that way with these. So check them out.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing. If we're recommending it, you know it's not going to be a chicken was there American history. You can trust it and you don't have to take the time and the energy to research and vet and do all the things. We've done that part. So you can trust it and you can use it, which is nice. And we do that because in our own personal homeschool journeys, we're just like you. We're tired. We never have enough hours in the day. We're spread too thin. I am perpetually in need of a nap. I'm a huge napper. So, yeah, we've done that part for you. And you can go take the nap and then use the unit study because you don't have to do the homework. We've done it for you. You're good.
Yep, absolutely. So that's the other thing too. If we sound like your people, that's awesome. We are so glad you found us. But please go ahead and give us a follow or a like wherever you're listening and on Instagram and Facebook. Heck, even on Patreon, there's a free follow option over there.
Mhm.
But just follow us so that we're more likely to show up in your account.
Yeah, definitely. All right. So, Our topic for the day is life skills. So here's the deal, a little behind the scenes scoop. We have a list. It's pretty messy. We just drop episodes there as they pop into our heads. And we work from that list when we're planning out the next week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever. We look at this messy list and we're like, let's talk about that thing this week, or this is timely because of this, that, or the other thing. So life skills has been on the list for a little bit. And I actually had one or two other topics in mind for this week. And then I saw a post the other day that was like, no, we're going to bump this one up. Okay. So a person, and I'm being very vague because their Facebook page has no information about themselves, nothing about how long they've been homeschooling. No, like, hi, I'm so-and-so, and this is my journey, and welcome to my page. Don't know their name, nothing. Okay. So the page is called The Bookish Homeschooler. It has about 44 followers at the time that I looked at it the other day, at the time we're recording this. It's clearly new. There's only a couple of posts, one of which was a recommendation for no spice romance books. So right away, I knew Amanda was out. She was like,
Peace.
yeah, no spice. What's the point? So,
None.
yeah,
Much like my food. None.
exactly. So she posted a carousel the other day. And again, I say she, I'm assuming, because again, I know nothing about this person, their authority to talk about homeschooling, anything. So her carousel was 5 controversial takes about homeschooling. One of them was about chores. And the carousel quote exactly said, housework is not a school lesson. Public kids do chores too. And we'll unpack all of that in today's episode. But that wasn't even the most bonkers one in the list. I just have to get this off my chest before we can get into life skills. She had one about not cheaping out on homeschool curriculum because your kids deserve better. And I was like, honestly, that's harsh. How many people are doing their best on a shoestring budget? And we've done episodes about, yes, you can homeschool on a shoestring budget. You absolutely can. Your kids will not be shortchanged. They will not be doomed for failure in life. It is totally possible. But I was reading that and just thinking, like, if you're already struggling to provide the resources that you are, like, what a way to make people feel like shit because they're not spending enough. And you didn't even define what that is. So it's just vague enough that everyone can feel like crap about themselves. And listen,
I love it. Vague enough that everyone can feel like crap.
yeah, right.
Fantastic.
And listen, I commented on it, not on her page because she shared it in a bunch of homeschool groups trying to drum up Facebook attention for her new page and all this kind of stuff. And it didn't go down like I think she thought it was going to. Most of the comments were not amazing. But I commented on that and I was like, listen, I don't feel personally attacked by this post. I've said it before. I've talked about what we do for homeschooling. I've spent a fortune on homeschooling. Do you need to do that? No. I will be the first one to tell you that there are amazing budget resources out there. I've learned more as an adult than I did in my incredibly overpriced private school education as a kid. I've learned a ton as an adult from documentaries, historical fiction novels, going to museums, and I'm growing like crazy as an adult and learning way more. So I was like, this isn't because I feel personally attacked, like you're judging the way I'm homeschooling, but you're judging the way other people are homeschooling, and that doesn't feel very good. So then it got better. Then there was this one that was ableist as hell that just said flat out, and this is a direct quote, your 8-year-old should know how to read. Prioritize it. Give them that gift. And look, we are all about promoting literacy. We did an episode one time debunking the whole homeschool mantra of you can never be behind. And we talked about it. Like, yeah, you can be behind. That is a thing. We're all about meeting your kids where they're at. But there's also a point where intervention might be needed because you can be behind. It is a possibility. That is a thing. So go listen to that if you're worried about it. It's probably not nearly as scary as you think it's going to be. But yeah, that is a thing. So we are all about promoting literacy. Even when we talk about play-based and organic early childhood education, we're talking about reading to our kids all the time and noticing letters on signs and pointing them out and promoting literacy. All of that.
Well, and I will say I'm all about phonics. And I 100% believe that if you're homeschooling in my way or you're coming to me for coaching, I'm going to guide you to a phonics curriculum by age 7. Like that's going to happen. So sure, be working towards it before the age of 8,
Mhm.
but that's not what that says.
Right. Because I'm sitting there envisioning a parent of a dyslexic child who is pouring every ounce of themselves into giving their child that gift of reading. And they feel like a salmon swimming upstream all day long. And they feel like they're failing and they're worried about their kid's future. And then they read this drivel from somebody who doesn't even tell us who they are or what their qualifications are. Like, ugh, like I was just, ugh. You know, you read the beginning of our book that's coming out at the end of this month. At the beginning, there's literally a section that says, "Why should you trust us with your kid's education?" And it's a decent lengthy bit about
The
the two
longest
of us.
chapter in the book.
Yeah. But it's like, here's why you can trust our advice. Here's our backgrounds. Here's what we've done. Here's what we know. Here's our education. Here's how we've gone about this. This person doesn't even tell you their first name and is judging. I can't. I was so over it. So anyway, we'll be focusing on that topic today: chores, housework, life skills, etc., because there's a lot more to it than most people probably realize. I know that was the case for me when we read a book in a book club that Amanda and I were in way back when during the pandemic before we started the podcast. And I realized how far short I was falling when it came to life skills. And I was like, oh, if you had asked me, I would have told you I was doing okay. And then we read this book and I was like, I am not doing okay. So I'm excited to dig into it today.
Well, yeah, exactly. And I think this is one of those areas where opinions and experiences vary widely and where many of us probably have opportunities, sometimes a lot of opportunities to be able to expand beyond what we're already doing. So these conversations where we hash it out, it can just be so helpful. Again, it's kind of like
Mhm.
last episode we talked about book club and how when you're in book club and you can kind of talk about different things and get different perspectives in the moment about specific things. It's so helpful. It's the same with this.
Mhm.
And as we talk through things, we're going to talk about a lot of things. We're going to give a lot of examples and ideas and things like that. Take the ones that work. Challenge your ideas about the ones that you're like, oh, that wouldn't work for our house. Is it really not going to work for your house or does it really not work? Those are two different things and that's okay. We are not saying you have to do all of these things, but having these conversations and really pushing yourself to think about what you're doing and why you're doing it and how it's working. It's so important.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. So it's going to be a good conversation today. I'm super excited. But first, we begin all of our episodes with a weekly recap. It's part of our anti-influencer stance because we'd rather give you an accurate, balanced, well-rounded glimpse into what homeschooling really looks like. So how's your week been, Amanda?
My week. Well, my week is focused mostly on, I mentioned last week that I had a whole bunch of specialist appointments. I'm not quite done with all of them yet. The real goal for me, if you haven't listened for a long time, you might not know, but I have chronic illness and I have a lot of different things happening and I have a big team of specialists. And so just because I see someone doesn't mean I have an answer. There's a lot of people that have to write their reports. And then one doctor who plays like, I call it like the quarterback. She has to look at everything and try to figure out what we're actually going to do. But I have this goal. My kiddo really wants to go see Machu Picchu. And so we have a trip booked with a tour of sorts to go actually to Machu Picchu this summer. And so I'm seeing everyone and trying to put everything in place and making sure that I can safely go do this trip, just my kiddo and I, and what kinds of medications and tweaks to medications and things I need to be keeping in mind and what needs to be put in place. So that's really dominating a lot of my life right now outside of work stuff and just trying to make sure all of those pieces are in place. It's nice that we're on our break. I do have to, as soon as we're done with this, once we wrap recording, I have to go to some chess club graduation, something. I'm not really sure what that is. I feel like that's a uniquely homeschool thing. Like, who has chess club graduation? I guess the one that my kiddo goes to on Wednesdays at noon. I don't know. But yeah, we're just rolling along, trying some things for the new school year. We're sampling a new math curriculum. I've talked about that before. My kiddo really likes his old one. I'm thinking maybe we need a new one. I don't know for sure where we're going to fall on that. Wrapping up some history. My kiddo doesn't mind that because he loves history. And it's a lot of read this slightly more whitewashed Eurocentric spine thing and then read a million books that are own voices and more well-rounded and watch documentaries together and talk through things. And yeah. So we're just taking it easy, but still doing a lot
Mhm.
of the things that we normally do.
Yeah.
That's what we got going on. How about y'all?
Sometimes a little status quo feels good, you know?
Right. Sometimes that's what you really need. I'm sure there
Yeah.
are people who are listening and are like, oh, June, the end of June, it's almost here. I'm just going to like status quo it out for at least a month and I'm going to love it
Hmm. Hmm.
while I hide at home, avoiding the crowds of all the other people who are at all of my favorite parks and museums.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, speaking of crowds, June's a little bit bananas where we live. So we live in Lisbon and we've been attempting to throw ourselves in culturally and try the things that are important here. So there's a month-long celebration that goes on here in Lisbon, Festas de Lisboa, that's centered around three saints specifically, but in Lisbon, specifically focusing on St. Anthony, Santo Antonio, being kind of the biggie because he was born in Lisbon. And I will say we are a secular space. None of these events feel at all like a Catholic ritual. I went to the park the other day and people are dancing and drinking beer. So I'm not promoting a religious activity. This is very much a cultural activity at this point here in Portugal. So, yeah. So, St. Anthony, born in Lisbon in 1195. Now, June is also the start of sardine fishing season, which there's this one store that sells like all these different sardines from Portugal. There's one in the airport. It has like a giant Ferris wheel of sardines and they roll around on this Ferris wheel. They're really into sardines here. So it is said that St. Anthony could speak to the sardines and they would actually stop and listen to him. So there's that. So the roots of the event are religious, but it really comes down to grilling sardines at street parties and DJs set up in parks blasting Bella Ciao and Lady Gaga until all hours of the night. So, the other day, the 12th, is Santo Antonio Weddings Day, where they choose 16 couples to get married, and it's a civil service, and there's this whole procession and all that kind of stuff. And then, of course, we had Pride Week. So there's a lot going on right now. But yeah, beyond that, we're status quo too, in the sense that my kids are all over the place and that's status quo for us. So on the day this drops, my daughter will be arriving back in Lisbon. She's going to the US for a weaving conference and we will be thrilled to welcome her back, but maybe slightly more thrilled to welcome her luggage back because she's bringing back a whole bunch of stuff from the US, things that we can't get here, things like Marsala cooking wine. Oh, I have to say that quietly because it's a surprise for my oldest. He's going to be so excited. Sudafed, because like sniffing herbs does not help. I'm sorry, it doesn't. Sudafed is, and the good Sudafed, the old kind that you had to show a driver's license to get, not the new crappy one that you can't make crystal meth out of and also doesn't help you breathe. Maxi pads that actually absorb things. And listen, I get that the absorption comes from toxic chemicals that should not be anywhere near your coochie, but they absorb. And I'm sorry, the ones here that are all natural and cotton and it's wet all day. It's just wet. Okay. So
Perimenopause is not made for all natural. I'm like,
no,
it's no, yeah.
no.
Yep.
My weak pelvic floor needs absorption. Okay.
Yeah.
I'd like to not be sitting in wet. Okay. So yeah, we'll be thrilled that she's back, but then we're going to empty her suitcase. But yeah, other than that, Liam's plugging along with math. Aiden's plugging along with his Python class. Things are fine. The usual. So all good things. All good things. Okay, so let's talk about life skills and chores and how or if those intersect with homeschooling. And this might be one of those episodes where Amanda and I differ a little bit.
Having already looked at the notes, I would say we do differ a fair amount. Look, if you're new to the podcast, I am an academic aggressive homeschooler, and Megan is, well, let's be real, she's having a little bit of an identity crisis these days because for ages she referred to herself as a loosey goosey unschooler. And while that's still true, lately she's been learning to adopt the phrase an intentional unschooler. We did a whole episode about that and how she got there and what that means. But either way, we absolutely homeschool very differently, almost on two ends of the spectrum, not at the very ends, but definitely there's a lot of space between how we homeschool.
Mhm.
And in my home, we have much clearer lines between what is classified as school and what is not school. And now there is absolutely plenty of learning and growth and development happening in the not school hours, but there is this delineation between those classifications. Whereas in Megan's household, it all blends together. It's life and development and learning with no delineation pretty much whatsoever. Would you say that I described that accurately? I mean, I don't actually live in your house, but this many years in, I feel like I've got the vibe.
Yeah, you nailed it. That's totally how we roll. Now, before we fully dive in, we'd love to share a bit of a disclaimer. Okay. In this episode, we are going to share suggestions for life skills. And at one point, we're going to offer ages and skills that you might introduce at those ages. But let's be super duper clear. We talk all the time about forward progress being the ultimate goal. So if you have a disabled child or child with learning differences and these timelines do not align with your kiddo's abilities, that is okay. The last thing we want is for anyone to walk away from this feeling like you're failing or like you've been judged. All of this is fluid. And we know that if you're here and you're listening to this episode, that you share our ultimate goal of raising kids who are as capable as possible for their next stage in life. And if that looks like living in a dorm and attending university, cool. If that means moving into your finished basement to live more independently, but still close to the support that they benefit from family, awesome. No matter what the trajectory of your kiddo's journey looks like, we see you, we see your effort, your experience is valid, and we do not want you to listen to these things that are very mainstream kind of general guidelines and take it as I'm not doing enough or I'm not welcome in this space, because that's totally not true.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think as homeschoolers, we have the unique opportunity to meet our learners where they're at and
Mm,
prepare them, not just for some generic future that is common for people their age, but for their specific abilities, their next steps, and their goals. And that is going to look different from home to home. Oftentimes, it's going to look different from kid to kid. That
mhm,
is totally okay. There's this trend in society at large where childhood kind of morphed into a group project. And somehow, over the years, parents seem to have taken on more and more of it. Earlier, Megan referenced a book that she and I read in the virtual book club that we did during the early days of the pandemic. It's called How to Raise an Adult, and it was written by a former Stanford dean. And in this book, it's filled with examples of young adults moving onto college campuses, showing up on their first day, academically accomplished, perhaps completely academically prepared, but lacking in resilience, in problem solving skills, real world problem solving skills, especially, and just independence. Adults removed way too many obstacles along the way for them.
mhm. Yeah, I loved that book. It was very eye-opening for me because I felt like I was doing a good job, and then I was like, "Oh." But
Whoops.
it emphasized letting kids experience struggle, failure, recovery, and not because the author is a masochist who wants kids and young people to suffer, but because competence comes from doing the things. And yeah, super eye-opening for me. She really brought some great questions to the forefront. Things like, are we confusing helping with overhelping? Where's that line? When does support become substitution? What happens when a child never practices discomfort?
I think it's so important to make sure that we not necessarily set up or create, but allow situations to unfold where we know there's a decent chance our kids are going to fail, but it's a really safe time and place for them to fail.
Mhm,
She proposed an alternative reality where instead of removing obstacles, parents and caregivers were coaching their kids through those obstacles.
mhm.
And I think that this is something that most parents, maybe especially Americans, need to really think about and work on. But as homeschoolers, we can do a lot more with this. That said, as homeschoolers, we might also need to be even more vigilant around whether or not we're smoothing the way too much.
Mhm.
A lot of times when we start homeschooling, there are other pressures or concerns. We're thinking about mental health, we're thinking about safety, but there's also so much pressure to get the education piece right. We have taken on a lot, and that pressure is real. We've talked about it in so many other episodes. But sometimes, in our efforts to make sure that our kiddos are getting everything they need and want in their education, we might accidentally remove too many opportunities to build these life skills of resilience. And it's obstacles that we're uniquely qualified to have them practicing. So I'm thinking things like my kiddo nailed their AP exam, but can they make a doctor's appointment when they have an earache? If you've got a homeschooler, they have the ability to make sure that they can call and practice those skills, and they can do it with you there to help them answer something if they get hung up, or to kind of coach them through it a little. Or something like, okay, so my child can write a 5-paragraph essay, but do they have any idea how to troubleshoot the first few steps when the Wi-Fi goes down? I
And again, I know there's blind spots for me in this area, but I will share an example. I was impressed the other day. So my daughter had come home at the end of her day. She was giving me a debrief about her day. At least in my home, that's the difference between her and my two boys. The debrief is very complete. So she has a studio space. She's an artist. There's 6 other artists and 2 interns in this super old apartment here in Lisbon, and they each have their own room and they've got a private space and etc. So anyway, there's a shared kitchen. And the day before this particular day, she did not eat her lunch and it was still sitting in the fridge. And she was like, well, no worries. I have my lunch. It's in the fridge. I'll eat it today. So she goes to open the fridge, lights out. She's like, okay, that's odd. She's feeling around. She touches the side, no vibrating, no buzzing. She's like, something's off here. So they have a WhatsApp group chat for all of the artists in the space. And she sent a text asking if anybody knew where the breaker was. And I was like, that was your first step. Like, go you, right? I was having a moment. So she walks me through this whole mental process. She's like, I checked the microwave, I checked the kettle, but I wasn't sure. Just because they're on the same wall doesn't mean they're on the same breaker and blah, blah, blah. And so she's like, this was plugged in here, that was plugged in there. She finally gets to the bottom of it and was able to determine who was the last person in the fridge, and then checked when that was so that she could determine how long the fridge had been not working and how long her food had not been cooling, so that she could see if it was safe for her to eat her chicken that had been sitting in there. And I just kind of stood there and I was like, huh, look at that. Okay. She didn't call me. She didn't ask me for help. It wasn't a big blip in her day where she was like, oh, I need to talk this through or whatever. She just took care of it and later just recapped it as part of the rest of her regular day. And so I was like, all right, I'm not completely screwing this up. This is good.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I mean, I think most of us have room to grow in a variety of areas, but your kids, they're well on their way. I mean, they're teenagers and they're like, yeah, they're well on their way. So I will say, going back to that social media post that Megan mentioned earlier in the episode, for me, it's one of those things. It is true. Pretty much all kids in traditional school settings or homeschooled, they have chores. Kids should have chores. I think that's a pretty well established and accepted thing. But I think one of the biggest differences is that we aren't talking regular chores like emptying the dishwasher or taking out the garbage. We are talking specific life skills that aren't found in a lot of brick and mortar schools, especially not anymore. I know for our family, when we were looking at brick and mortar schools for early elementary, I loved the schools that required weekly sewing classes. That was not common. And there were a lot of people that were like, why do you, like, why? Why are you
Like,
making sure your son is taking a sewing class?
is this kindergarten or a sweatshop? What's happening here? Right.
But my husband is really good about fixing the holes in his own socks or, things like that. And yes, I can teach my kiddo that, but I'm thinking my kid's going to be gone for 8 hours a day. Let the school include that in the stuff they're teaching. That's actually
Yeah.
useful. Or the Montessori programs have kids preparing their own snacks and cutting up fruits and vegetables in kindergarten and first grade. Most traditional brick and mortar schools aren't doing those things because the focus has shifted so much to teaching to standardized tests. And standardized tests just don't care about life skills, for better or worse. They are not checking for life skills.
No, absolutely not. And we talk about deschooling all the time. I mean, all the time. And it is so important at the beginning of your journey. But then it's also helpful to acknowledge these moments where you catch yourself thinking stuff like, we haven't done anything all week. And you're beating yourself up over it because you haven't sat down with the math workbook or you haven't finished the read aloud. So you start to beat yourself up over this, like we haven't done anything all week. But it's important to take time to realize, and this is where deschooling comes in handy, that you worked together to plan a summer camping trip in a national park, and you planted your spring garden, and you took the car in for service, and you did a bunch of other things. And those life skills are essential. I mean, you're planning a summer camping trip in a national park. I can't tell you how many times I see people that are like, how are we teaching the geography of the 50 states? Listen, I know we were very privileged to be able to go camp and traipse around and do all this kind of stuff. But I'm like, my kids learned it through planning road trips. It was like, okay, well, this is near that, and this is near this, and that's near that. So this is our road trip for the summer. And we would go, and it was not fancy. Trust me, my kids have showered in more truck stops than I can tell you. Our camper van had a composting toilet, and everyone was on rotation to empty it. It was not fancy. But yeah, that's how they learn geography. But they're learning research skills. They're learning reading maps and navigation, budgeting and cost, decision making and prioritization, time management, problem solving, working online reservation systems. Let me tell you, Yosemite, there's one booking day a month for Yosemite. And every single one of my kids was in front of a computer and with a phone, and they were booking and dialing because the whole park books out for a month in about 6 minutes. And so could those kids get a Yosemite reservation? Yes, they could. So they were totally involved in that stuff, right? Resource management. Okay, well, if we're whitewater rafting here, we can't go ziplining there because I cannot print money. It is illegal and I don't have the press. So learning how to do those things. And that's the same across the board. If it's planting a garden, there's going to be things in there about pest control and spatial distancing. How far apart are you planting things? Different plant biology and ecology concepts. Taking the car in for service. I mean, how many adult people don't realize that when the person comes back in and goes, oh, we've looked at your car and it needs these 10 things, that they don't realize that their car doesn't really need those 10 things. Those are life skills that they need to learn so that the kid doesn't end up with a $3,000 bill for stuff that they didn't actually need. So being able to ask those questions and dig deeper and all of that kind of stuff that comes with those activities, it's really, really important and it's really valuable.
And yeah, now look, Megan is going to count all of those things as schooling, and they might even make it onto her transcript in some way or another. I'm not doing that. I'm not counting any of that, or at least most of it, as transcript worthy. They don't generally count for us as school unless it's maybe a special project or an elective like home ec. But I absolutely want my kiddo learning all of those things. Our school time is math, ELA, science, history, civics, foreign language, all of those more traditional subjects. But also, we homeschool. So my kiddo is doing way, way more work each day in way, way less time. And that means that we have got a lot more time every day for him to be practicing these life skills, to be implementing them, to be using them. He makes his own breakfast and lunch most days. He regularly helps with laundry. He's started running errands for us. These are all things that can get done during the day when most other kids would be in a brick and mortar school. But that also means that now our evenings and weekends are free for more dedicated family time when my husband is actually home and available, instead of us having to use our family time in the evenings or on the weekends for all of the chores and the household tasks. I mean, don't get me wrong, sometimes that still has to happen. But if we can be focusing on life skills during the day, during time that he would otherwise be sitting bored because of XYZ in a traditional classroom, it gives us so much more flexibility and freedom. Now, again, like I said, Megan is going to count almost all of those life skills type activities as school. But that goes back to our very different philosophies when it comes to homeschooling. And now, stay with me here for a minute, slight tangent. But one of our most popular episodes is the one on the invisible labor of homeschooling. It would be pretty insincere for us to do this whole episode on incorporating life skills into your homeschool routine without acknowledging that one of the biggest reasons we often don't actually incorporate them is because we're tired, like really freaking tired.
Mhm.
We're already doing so much and handling so much. You're only one person. You have the traditional education components and your home to take care of and paying bills and managing appointments. And then every time you turn around, someone is hungry or you're out of food or they're playing a game of 20 questions that you did not sign up for. It is a lot and it never seems to end.
I had this exact experience today because we had something arrive and it needed to be assembled and put together. And I realized recently that I lean on my oldest for that stuff more because he was the one who was capable first. And so those kind of by default became his jobs. Well, he was super busy today. So it was a perfect opportunity for me to say to my youngest, hey, can you please assemble this? I was sitting on the couch working, getting some stuff done. Now, these two children are best friends, but also polar opposites. I've talked before about how my oldest is like mute and you have to pull information out of him, where my youngest never stops moving or making noise. And so literally the thing he was assembling had this long tube and he's like making noises into the tube and he's like, hold that end up to your ear. I'm like, dude, and I didn't say it out loud, but I'm like, I'm trying to get stuff done, which is why I asked you to do this. And I was like, oh, this is a very different experience than if your brother had done this in my head again. And we got through it. But yeah, I feel that in my bones because any of these tasks, I can do this task that I've been doing my entire adult life, and I can get it done in no time, and I can get it done in the way that it needs to be done or the way that I want it to be done. Or I could stop and think through this task in every minute detail, making sure to identify pieces of the process that I do unconsciously. But if I pass it on to my kid, I have to identify those little steps because they're not going to do it unconsciously. And I have to sequence them in my head and explain it to my kiddo in a way that makes sense to them and maybe make some modifications also for like my youngest kiddo's sensory needs or something like that. I might have to make some changes to the process. And then let's say they're going to the store to pick something up. Right before we started recording today, kiddo was like, can you make brownies? And I was like, yeah, I have just enough time. Realized we had no oil. Aldi's like a block away. I said, can you run to Aldi to get oil? It's like, oh, do you have a picture of what the oil container looks like? No, because the bottle was empty and I recycled it. Could you look on Google Images before I go and see if you can tell me what oil looks like? Okay, no problem. And then I got a call while I was there. Is this it? And I was like, yes, that's it. So then there's the specifics on how to pick out a fresh watermelon or how to know if you should buy these carrots because tomorrow they're going to be soggy and floppy. And so all of that takes more time for me to have to do those things. Okay, they head off to the store. Now, all of my kids have Google Pay with at least one of our credit cards available to it. They're very trustworthy children. We've never had a problem. They need that for emergency. We live in a city. They need to be able to tap to get on the bus to get home in case their Metro card's not working or something. Okay. But then they're going to be like, which card should I use? Because sometimes there's more points on groceries on one card versus another. And they know that because they're very well trained. Then they come home from the store and I was expecting a green bell pepper. And in fact, I got a jalapeno pepper. And yes, they are both green, but are they going to be very, very different in a recipe? Yes, they are. So, the alternative scenario was I could have walked my happy ass to the store. It's a 5-minute walk. The weather outside is beautiful. There's a lovely breeze. I'm going to have 5 minutes of alone time, or maybe I call my mom or I call my best friend or I listen to my audiobook or I put on some sort of powerhouse song that I want to sing along to in my head and really just have a moment. And I would have been back in under 15 minutes and I would have used way less mental energy. I would have gotten the pepper that I wanted. So like, am I guilty of taking the second route? Yeah, I do it. I do it sometimes because hello.
Well, right. And anyone who says they don't is a liar, liar, pants on fire. Sometimes you just need to do it and get it done, right? I mentioned before that my kiddo is getting pretty good at cooking, mostly for himself, but he's also recently become the family brownie maker, which is absolutely awesome. What is less awesome is that while he feeds himself and he's learning more and more recipes, and I'm becoming more and more confident that he's going to be the one cooking the home cooked meals for his friends and roommates in college, the fact remains that the kitchen is still a disaster whenever he has made something. Now, nightly kitchen duty is not my job, it's my husband's job. He cleans up at the end of the night. But I just have to put on my blinders and try not to let it drive me absolutely crazy because it's not my job, but it's hard. I go into the kitchen, I use the kitchen. It's hard to walk in there and be like, oh my God, nope, nope, nope. I'm not nagging. It's not my job. If my husband is fine with the way it is, then it's not, yep, okay. So look, I can absolutely see that perfectionism is going to play a role in the reasons that we so often skip incorporating kids into life skill tasks. One of the biggest adjustments for me when my physical health worsened significantly several years ago now was learning to let go of these things. Like I said, my husband is in charge of cleaning up the kitchen each night. His version of clean is definitely not my version of clean. And I am absolutely guilty of scrubbing the stovetop and the kitchen sink whenever he's traveling for work, right? Like he's gone for more than a few days. The very first thing I do is go and clean the kitchen the way I want for while I'm the only one in there. It is hard when you give the responsibility to someone else, even if you know they need to learn it or it's a more fair division of labor. If the floors need to be swept, I can sweep them and they will be clean. If I delegate that to my kiddo, they might be cleanish, but also suddenly my child who is accelerated in math will forget that 90-degree angles exist and not a single corner will have been swept. Everything will have been swept in a circle or an oval. So we tend to just do these things for ourselves because we want it to be done right, even though we know that there are negative downstream effects when we skip the opportunities to let our kids practice and build these life skills.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, the last thing we want is for our kids to enter adulthood while learning adulting or practicing adulting for the first time because the stakes are much higher then.
Yep.
If we can scaffold those skills while they're still at home and they're in the safety of our little nest, they're going to be so much better off. So in just a moment, we're going to explore some of the life skills your kiddo might engage in by age. Again, remember, loose guidelines. If your kiddo genuinely isn't ready for some of these examples, don't stress, you're doing great. But first, if we could just toss out a quick reminder that we are much, much more than a podcast. We started out as a podcast. And we have grown. Homeschool Moms Unfiltered is at this point an entire universe of resources and support. We offer online courses with workbooks to help you outline your homeschool journey, choose curriculum, understand developmental expectations. Our book is coming out like so soon at this point. It's June 23rd. It will gently guide you step by step. Like we will hold your hand from, maybe I want to homeschool to I'm writing a transcript and graduating my kiddo. Everything you need is in there. It's literally called the only homeschool book you actually need for that reason. We host live meetings and offer support and community for secular and progressive homeschoolers. If you'd like something more personal and focused on exactly what you've got going on with your kiddo and your home, we also offer coaching sessions that are individualized. We offer robust and incredible, if we do say so ourselves, unit studies. Our most recent one is our take on all the America 250 stuff that's floating out there. Ours is called Promises, Progress, and Contradictions. So very different than the Turning Point USA version that's being cranked out that says America can do no wrong and has always been perfect. Yeah, ours is a little bit different. It's not all negative, but it's a whole lot more balanced. And it's very, very, very interactive. There's role plays and creative projects and constitutional rewrites that are set up kind of like Mad Libs and all sorts of good stuff. So check out the show notes. There's a link to our website in there, homeschoolmomsunfiltered.com. On our website is everything. You can find our books, our unit studies, our coaching sessions, our Patreon community, our online courses. It's all there. All right. So life skills by age. So ages 6 and under, again, loose guideline. At this point, you're focusing on participation. A lot of the life skills that you're focusing on at this age, you're doing with your kiddo, but it's about instilling that sense of responsibility and the confidence for them to know that they can do it, which is totally awesome. So household things like putting away toys, help sorting laundry, feeding pets, making beds, as imperfectly as that might go down. I made a bed for the first time in my very own apartment when I was 20 years old, and it did not go well. It was a double size bed. A double is like a square, but the sheet somehow is not really a square. There's still one side that's slightly longer. Oh my gosh. Okay. Clearing dishes off the table at the end of dinner or any meal. Self-care items, things like dressing themselves, brushing their teeth and hair, learning their address and their parents' name, huge safety skill, practicing basic hygiene. Social emotional skills like asking adults for help, knowing how to introduce themselves, how to handle losing at a game. Oh, we still can't play Monopoly in my house. Oh, it ends in tears sometimes. It's just one kid. It's one kid that's the competitive one. Ooh, starting to identify emotions and getting good at understanding I'm hungry, I'm tired, I'm frustrated, I'm sad. Good things for them. Practicing waiting. Oh, that's a tough one for lots of people of all ages. General things like counting money, helping shop at the grocery store. Hey, can you grab 2 of those? Or can you pick out 3 apples that are medium sized? Following really simple recipes and working alongside you. How to use timers, which is great too for knowing those boundaries. Like in 10 minutes, we're going to clean up this thing and do that. Learning routines. The unpredictability sometimes, especially for neurodivergent kids, can be challenging. So knowing the pace of what's coming and what to expect, awesome. Safety is a big one. So things like knowing emergency numbers, learning boundaries, recognizing who is a trusted adult, understanding basic road safety, when to cross, when not to cross, when to hold hands, checking if your ball rolls into the street before you go running into the street. I'll add to that my kids took part in a safety program when they were 4 years old that taught things like how to identify a safe adult, which can be really challenging because you watch the news, we see teachers, we see piano teachers, we see scout leaders. These are all adults that should be safe. And yet I watch enough Dateline and enough murder true crime to know that that is not always the case. So figuring out specifically who is a safe adult and how, huge. The difference between tattling and reporting, because even if we're not talking to our kids about tattling, they're getting it from cartoons and stuff. Oh, he's a tattletale and stuff like that. And then somebody says to them, don't tell your parents this thing. And then they've got that mixed with that tattletale message that's been in cartoons. And they need to know that reporting is about safety. And the biggest one that my kids learned was to always assume that a gun is real and always assume a gun is loaded. And yes, they learned that at age 4. So unfortunate reality, especially if you're in the United States, these are things they need to know.
Yeah. Another safety one that I will bring up that we kind of missed there is safety around like home fires, house fires, or natural disasters where you live. Make sure you're talking about the plan. If there's a fire in your home, you don't want your kiddo coming to look for you. They need to know where they're supposed to go, how they're supposed to get out, where they're supposed to meet you afterwards, have a designated spot. Whether you're in a house or an apartment building, a condo building, all of those kinds of things matter. And younger is always good. You'll have to revisit it and that kind of stuff. And the same for if it's a tornado, make sure they know what room they're going into. If you live somewhere with earthquakes, make sure that they know how they're handling it. Absolutely start that young and revisit it and build on it. So if we're talking ages, then from ages 7 to 10, at this point, we're going to start focusing on increasing independence. So that might look like household stuff like vacuuming, sweeping the floor, better than mine, hopefully, folding laundry, loading the dishwasher, preparing simple meals, packing their own bag, whether that's a lunch bag or a school bag for camp or something like that, or maybe it's practicing with their actual travel bag, maybe the first night, or packing their PJs and their stuffy or whatever that might be. You've got practical skills, things like reading a map. It's kind of crazy how many kids can't read a map anymore because we don't. Well, and Megan can't read a map either, but we have GPS. And so we're using a lot fewer maps, but we take for granted the fact that we understand how the GPS works and we can look at that and read the map. But if we're not practicing that and making sure we're showing kids, they're going to be at a real disadvantage. Using a calendar, it's really helpful for them to be able to plan and pace, and they're going to be able to use that to scaffold other skills with time. This is a good time to introduce their own little paper calendar to be able to work with. Telling time, make sure they know how to read a real clock. It's kind of amazing how often we don't do it because we think, well, we don't have any real analog clocks in our home. But if you're out, especially if you're in a city, there's going to be clock towers and things like that that they'll need to be able to look at and tell. Making shopping lists. It's a little thing, but it's important. And a lot of people don't realize it. And how many times do things go super off the rails at the grocery store? How to compare prices, practicing that kind of stuff. And you're going to do more with that a little later on, but figuring out comparing prices, understanding the idea. You've got social skills, things like ordering their own food at a restaurant, making phone calls with support, actually understanding how to pick up a phone and use it, not just on video, which most of the kids at this age know, but they actually need to be able to make a call, writing thank you notes, resolving minor conflicts. You have executive function skills, things like following multi-step directions. You might need to use checklists or things like that to help with this. There's tracking responsibilities. Again, helping them understand that they can create checklists to do that, or figuring out what systems work and introducing different options. And estimating time needed, practicing working back. If we want to leave here, if you want to do this thing at this time, what does that look like? And helping them practice that skill of building back so that they know what they need to do and when they need to do it. And again, safety options. At this point, you're going to start talking about basic first aid stuff. They're going to need to know allergies and medical need things. We're not talking they have to take their first CPR class and first aid and pass it, but what does it mean if this happens, or who are we going to go to if that happens? Those kinds of things are important, and they're old enough to be able to grasp those ideas. And then beginning to understand online safety. They're not going to have it mastered by any stretch of the imagination. There are plenty of adults who don't have it mastered, but it's a great time to make sure that you're really talking about it, safe people, safe things, figuring out the rules and the boundaries you're going to have in your own home. Great age.
All right. Average age is about 10 to 13, where at this point we're transitioning into our kids having ownership over these skills and tasks. Amazing. So things like home skills, being able to cook meals, does it need to be Michelin star? No, totally fine. Throw something together, super basic. Start to finish, laundry skills. Put it in the washer, put it in the dryer. Babysitting basics, not just for girls. Let's break down some of those gender stereotypes. Household cleaning. Absolutely. Finances, budgeting and allowance. We've never really been an allowance household, if I'm being honest. We've always been kind of a earn your own money kind of household, but they're still budgeting. They're learning how to budget. If I want to buy this really expensive thing, how am I going to make that happen? So comparing subscriptions or just comparing costs of things. I've told the story before about when my kids went grocery shopping and my daughter came home and she was so excited because she had gotten the best price on Cheerios, but the box was minuscule. And I was like, awesome job getting the best price, but maybe we could have gotten 2 of them then. But hey, she did the thing. She compared the prices. So that's part of that process. We just didn't eat a lot of Cheerios that week. It's fine. Understanding taxes exist. I hear Homeschool Moms Unfiltered has a pretty amazing unit study on taxes. Just saying, just saying. Saving, setting goals and saving for certain things, tracking spending in different ways. Social skills, being able to email an adult. Maybe it's an online class that they're taking, to be able to email and say, hey, I'm going out of town this weekend. I'm not going to be at class on Friday. That seems so basic to us, but it's not until you've done it a couple of times, and it can feel overwhelming at the start. Scheduling activities, handling disagreements, whether it's with friends, family members, asking questions directly and having the gumption to walk up and do that thing. problem solving, things like troubleshooting technology. This one I feel like kids are so good at early on, but maybe it's technology that they're not using super duper often. We had a thing where there's a screw on the back of our vacuum cleaner that's just decided to come out and not stay in place anymore, no matter how much you screw the screw into the hole. And so yesterday I was like, hey, kiddo, can you handle this? It has tape on it. That's fine. It's really sophisticated looking. But you know what? He fixed it. I didn't have to do it. So we're good. So yeah, planning projects, recovering from mistakes. Oh, that's hard. That's hard for grown-ups to do, but instilling those skills with our kids when they're younger. Managing hygiene independently. Can we talk about that? I'm still like, your fingernails need to be cut. You should have 2 eyebrows. Can we separate those? Like, I mean, it's a work in progress.
Yes. Washing long hair. I want to know the age when they're actually really competent at washing long hair. I don't.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So tracking to-do list items, whether that's assignments, things that they're working on independently, and packing for trips, which you alluded to in the last one too, Amanda, but like fully packing at this point. I will say my kids were packing well before 10 to 13. But again, I had 3 kids under 4 and I traveled solo with my kids all the time. There was just only so much one human being could do. So I created a packing template. And before Liam could read it, had pictures. So it would have a t-shirt and shorts and socks. And then I would just have a space next to it for the number. And so I would print off 3 copies, put the numbers in, and then it would have things like your toothbrush, your charger. And in the beginning, when it was a new skill, we were scaffolding, and I would say, make a big pile on the floor of these things and we'll go through them and then they'll end up in a bag. Eventually, they were just in charge of packing on their own. And that was that. Now they're totally packing on their own. Obviously, they're much older. And yeah, sometimes there were failures, but you know what? I didn't have to do it. Did Liam swim in a swimming pool in Gatlinburg in a bathing suit that was like shrink wrapped onto his body? And I'm not sure why it was still in his drawer when it was that small. He did. But you know what? He had fun. No circulation appears to have been permanently damaged. It went in the charity bin when we got home, and I didn't have to pack the bag. So it was fine.
We went to Europe for 3 months. And my kiddo packed exactly 4 pairs of underwear. I was like, I'm not entirely sure how this is. And the first place we were staying, it was over the holidays. Everything was closed. There was no laundry. Like, I was like, this is like, okay. As soon as the stores are all back open at like a normal, like, we have to go buy more underwear because I am not messing with 4 pairs of underwear for the entire time.
Washing it in the sink.
Yeah. In the winter in Europe, I'm hoping it's going to dry, but it's going to take 3 days to dry. There is not time for that. I'm not washing a pair of underwear every day so that eventually you have it to wear. Like, no.
They'll smell musty.
Exactly. Right. Like,
oh my gosh.
There are failures, but that's how you learn. He's never accidentally significantly underpacked his underwear since. So there you go.
I would love to say that's true. For my oldest, he has forgotten swimsuits on so many trips, and they've been on the list, that he owns more random swimsuits that I've picked up at Target. And when I say Target, P.S., by the way, we left the U.S. before the Target DEI thing. But yeah, we would pop into Target and he would pick up a swimsuit. I mean, it happened on so many trips. It wasn't even funny. And then before he went to Canada earlier this year, I was popping into vintage stores and thrift stores just looking for a nice cozy sweater for him. And it was so funny because my daughter was like, doesn't he have a sweater? And I was like, no, he lost it on a bus in Greece when he was on that trip. Oh, is that the sweater that he bought because the other one got stolen at an airport when he wasn't looking? Yeah, that's that one. But that's the one that he replaced because the other one he left in a hotel. And yep. Yeah. So yeah. So we definitely have our fair share of failures, but we just pick up and move on. The other thing that I will say, you brought up packing a lunchbox for a day trip or something like that. When my kids were small, we were out and about all the time. My kids were raised at the beach. They could swim in the Atlantic before they could walk. They lived at the beach. Everybody had a task. So it was like, you're in charge of towels, you're in charge of sunblock, you're in charge of filling the water bottles, you're in charge of getting the beach toys. And the biggest thing that I think made it successful for us was that those tasks did not rotate. I think sometimes there's a thing where like they all need to experience every job. I'm sorry, getting the beach toys and getting the towels, it's the same fucking job. You're just picking up 2 different things. We don't need to rotate so you can all have this experience. But just kind of having a steady thing that was your programmed thing. If you want to go have a great day at the beach, I'm down, but I'm going to need help and everybody needs to have their job. And so it just, for us not rotating, made it much, much easier. So I'll just throw that out there because I feel like sometimes there's this equitable thing. Then I'm all about equity, but Oh, in that case, it was just easier to be like, you're always on towels.
I'm going to say too, I'm going to throw in for the 10 to 13 age group, buying gifts.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
Start practicing thoughtfulness. Is this
Mm-hmm.
something that they want, or is it something that
Mm-hmm.
you want
Yes.
and you're going to give them? How to
Mm-hmm.
buy flowers. Last year, I took my kiddo to the florist so that he could buy flowers for one of his best friends. He was having a music recital, and the process, he was like, I don't like, let's just go to the grocery store and get, and I was like, no, we're going to buy real flowers, because at some point in your life, you're going to want to buy real flowers for someone, and you have to know how to do that. And we went through the whole process of picking things out and working with the florist, picking things out of the cooler. It's a process. It's not
Mm-hmm.
easy. And so practicing those things, how to address mail, how to actually mail packages. If you want to
Mm-hmm.
put together a care package for someone, we did that just a couple of weeks ago. My kiddo was actually sending Pokemon cards off to be graded, and I made him do it all on his own. And we went to the post office and he talked to them and made sure that he went through each step. These are the kind of things that don't happen that often. So you have to make a real effort to practice and really scaffold those skills so that they get the practice.
Mm-hmm.
There are certain skills that it's like, oh, we never covered that, but we do it all the time, so we can quickly ramp up and do it. But gift buying, you're probably not buying gifts that often. You're
Mm-hmm.
probably not sending packages that often. So anytime they come up, try to remember to include your kiddo.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we're on to ages 14 to 18. At this point, we're really gearing up to send them out into the world, hopefully, mostly independently and on their own. So you've got more financial literacy goals, how to budget monthly expenses, making sure they know how to open a bank account and the differences between bank accounts, checking accounts, savings accounts, those kinds of things, understanding credit and simple savings and investment options. File simple taxes. They should absolutely be practicing how to file basic taxes, even if they don't have their own. And again, we have that whole tax unit. There's a thing that helps them practice that in that unit. Understanding insurance basics. They're going to have insurance, or at the very least know how to get things covered and use their insurance card and an HSA card or whatever else. Learn about contracts and leases and understand how to read them and negotiate or advocate if necessary. Grocery shopping independently. They should absolutely be able to do this by the 14 to 18 year. For the neurotypical kiddo, again, there are obviously exceptions there, but don't be one of those parents. It's like, oh, I can't expect my teenager to go to the grocery store. They can go to the grocery store. Navigating public transit, it's the same thing. I know if you don't live in a big city, or even if you live in a big city, sometimes it's like, oh, I'm not sure, but they can handle it. And they, you know, they figured out how to read a map because we did that already. And so now they can overlay that with public transit and troubleshoot and problem solve those things. Meal planning, super important to be able to understand you're not just cooking a meal, but you need to plan for it. And then you ideally plan for more than one meal, and how you scale that up so that you've got leftovers and those kinds of things. What things work as leftovers and what things don't work as leftovers. Also a very important skill at this age.
Oh my
Handling
gosh. My kids
conflicts.
had a whole thing the other day where we had a heat wave last week and a jar of Nutella kind of melted in the pantry area. And Astrid was like, you can put it in the fridge and it'll firm back up because Liam is very texture sensitive. And he had this whole, it will get bacteria, Astrid, because it was hot and then it will get cold. He's like, it's time and temperature abuse, Astrid. And she was like, it's not that hot, Liam. It was hot in the kitchen and it was probably had some sun out. Time and temperature abuse is like when you take something 350 degrees and put it in the fridge. But he was like hell bent. And I wasn't there for this whole thing. I found out about it a couple of days later. And it finally came down that he was going to get a different jar of Nutella from Aldi that had never been affected, and she could eat that jar and she was like, I'll put it in the fridge and I'll be fine. Like, they had this entire debate about going from hot to cold and bacteria growth, and I was like, all right, they listen to something I say, so there you go.
Yep, there you go. That's a perfect example. And your story earlier, how to handle home and car maintenance basics. We're not saying they need to be able to flip a house, but this is the time to start practicing these things and getting a better handle for how to handle the basics and how to look up the things they don't know, or how to vet vendors or people that you might need to come in. Involve them in
Mhm.
that stuff. Career
Mhm.
skills, resume writing, how to fill out a job application, interview skills, professional email etiquette. We talked before about being able to email an adult, and that is great, but it doesn't have to be nearly as professional and put together if you're just telling a teacher you're not going to be there this week. They do need to know how to actually send a good email. Time management, we're just going to keep working on that because it gets more and more complicated the older you get. And networking, that is a
Mhm.
true skill that is so important for jobs that a lot of people don't get to learn and practice when they're younger, and then they're just suddenly thrown into networking events.
Mhm. Yeah. More stuff in this age range because we're getting ready to launch. There's a lot going on here. So, adult systems like making appointments, refilling prescriptions, navigating healthcare, filling out forms, understanding voting. That's a first with one of my kids because he turned 18 earlier this year. I mean, they'd come voting with me since they were kids, but he actually gets to do the thing this year. How to read a pay stub and figure out why you have so much less money than you were anticipating. Problem solving skills, handling transportation issues. Oh, we had a huge strike the other day. The metro was down. Okay, what else are we going to do? Solving conflicts without parents, navigating bureaucracy. Oh, that's a fun lesson in adulting, isn't it? Recovering from failure, we've talked about already, but the failures get bigger and the safety net gets smaller. So the more prepared they are, the better. Emotional skills like self advocacy, boundaries, stress management, especially in those high school years, getting ready for potentially university or the workforce, asking for help appropriately. So much to do.
Well, that's it. And now listen, if you just listen to us go through all of those and you're like, holy shit, I am in so much trouble. I am not instilling any of these skills. My kids are screwed. I have failed. Like, look, none of that is true. It's okay. We get it. You're juggling a million things, and things rarely go as smoothly or as quickly as we planned when it comes to homeschooling. Just please take a deep breath. Think about some of them. Maybe make yourself a list. Think about which ones you can start on now, which ones are maybe going to be in your 6-month plan, which ones just don't really seem to fit your family or your kids or where they're going. Just make a plan and plug away. It's okay. We're talking baby steps here. We're not talking like, oh my God, I have to teach them everything in the next month. Like, let's go now. It's okay. You're doing awesome.
Absolutely. But as you kind of enter this phase of, okay, I need to focus this a little bit more potentially, we can offer some questions that might be helpful if you're looking to make baby steps and figuring out where to start. So things like, what tasks am I still doing because it's easier for me to just do them myself? What discomfort am I preventing? And is that discomfort mine? Meaning it's going to drive me crazy if the floors look like they do. Or is it my child's discomfort? What would happen if I stepped back and stopped doing this thing or participated in this activity less and left space for it to be taken up? What skills does adulthood actually require? Or what skills do I perceive it will require when my child is ready to launch or ready to step into their version of adulthood? And their version of adulthood might still be a very supported version of adulthood. So in that case, you might find yourself looking to build independence where it makes the most sense for your kiddo. You might ask yourself, what mistakes can my child make safely right now?
And look, that last question, that's the key. Kids are absolutely going to make mistakes and they're going to mess things up. But we want to really make sure that right now we're focusing on the relatively harmless or minor things that they can fail at now while it's low stakes. This
Hmm.
is the time. This is the time to encourage and empower and help them. And yes, it's going to be challenging, but we can focus on scaffolding. If you listen to the podcast, you know we talk about scaffolding all the time with all sorts of things, but we talked about it at the top of the episode. All of these things can be done with some scaffolding. And again, that knowledge and understanding that they're going to make mistakes and they're going to mess things up. And that's part of the learning process. You have to practice to get anywhere close to perfect. And we're not trying for perfect. We're just trying for improvement.
Mhm.
So there you go. Life skills in a really large nutshell. Hopefully you took something useful from it. And if not, well, thanks for hanging out with us anyway. So we like to wrap up every episode with a mantra. And I think that for this specific episode, it is useful to have two mantras because I feel like life skills is one of those things that you're either like, I've got this, I'm ready, or you're like, oh my God, I think I'm going to cry because I think I've really fucked shit up. So take whichever one works best for you. We've got independence is not built in one giant leap. It is built in 1,000 tiny moments when we step back and let them try. Perfect, reasonable, sound. But also, sometimes raising capable humans means accepting that the dishwasher will be loaded like performance art for a while. Whichever
Ours
one
is
you need.
performance art.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I mentioned recently we did a chore rotation and there's a different kid on dishwasher and it went from Tetris, precision. Oh my gosh. And it is performance art personified at this point in time. I'm like, I'm breathing. I'm breathing. So yeah, just letting it go. It's going to be okay. Anyway, so yeah, as Amanda said, thanks for hanging out with us today and happy homeschooling.
Yeah, have a great one.